Godzilla and Kong the New Empire is the latest Monsterverse film to hit theaters, but does it have enough stamina to pack a punch? Hey everyone, welcome to Cinema, where we focus on the film. I'm Josh, this is Simply Cinema. Let me know in the comments below if you had the chance to see Godzilla x Kong and what you think of it down below, or if you're waiting for this review to help you decide if you're going to see it or not, and just generally going right into the synopsis. As Godzilla currently inhabits Earth and Kong is in the Hollow Earth, they have to detect this new increase of radiation that leads them to figure out what is going on with Kong and Godzilla and make sure they don't meet, but they find out there's a new threat that's on the horizon that will lead to a big final battle. And going right into positive, I want to preface by saying I was not too big of a fan of the last couple films we've been getting from this franchise. Obviously it's a big, schlocky, blockbuster fun, and this one delivers on the dynamics that you kind of want from that, being pure entertainment, going to the big screen to watch big monster fights. But of course, with the past couple films, we get some trouble handling the human situations and everything that goes on with dissecting depth from these characters. And while we don't get a ton from them, there's sufficient amount of means to understanding their motives or going about helping the monsters in enough manner that it establishes culture behind the mute girl and goes about doing the same for all of the supporting cast. There's a little bit of humor added into the mix that's a lot more subtle and not too much force like some of the other films that really actually delivers, gives me a few laughs, which doesn't always happen for these types of films. And it delivers also, of course, on the monster fights as well, which there's a bit more to be had here, and their big screen experience is just really fun and something I haven't had in a little while, at least for this type of genre for a film. Just having these monster fights with Godzilla, Kong, these other monsters, and just how they flow throughout. The story structure is a lot more sound than I was expecting from this film, given the last couple of films, and just the comparison to be had with those versus these, I was genuinely surprised what you had. And so if you're a big fan of the Monsterverse films in general, even if you're only going for the monster fights, this has a bit more that may be really pleasing to what it has. And not only that, this story, of course, is a lot more sound, and the deep dive into cultures, both with the mute girl and Kong, what they have to do with their story, showing backstory based on how they're building up the lore and exploring more into the realm of the humans and the ancient times of these creatures, becomes more compelling, more interesting, because you're not surrounding yourself only with the humans for a good majority of film, which leads into the flow of the camera movement and the camera work, which is not necessarily the best from this franchise, but it still works really good and better than Adam Wingard's last project, Godzilla vs. Kong, which this is the first film that we get a returning director. Adam Wingard does a great job with this film. It feels more focused on where it is headed. It has a main goal. It has a couple mystery things where you have to figure out what exactly is going on in order to get to the end, but it is still straightforward, easy to follow, and what you ultimately get is a pleasing piece that isn't necessarily a masterpiece. You're not really writing it off as something that you should watch over and over for how deeply well metaphorical or integrated it into the logic of what you might expect for consistent things, but this delivers on the monster fights and, surprisingly, some of the big human moments that don't always work at the end of the day. And so going right into the mix elements, I first want to go off with how the art form isn't always the most consistent. The CGI isn't the best. It is delivered in a way that's proficient enough for what you're getting. I wasn't too bothered by it overall, but I still had the eye to be able to see how it doesn't look like it's totally realistic in some certain aspects, some certain scenes, but overall I still had the experience that I talked about in the positives that didn't overall affect how the art looks versus what I'm getting out of it as a whole. So it isn't a grand film by how intricately put together it is and complete that it looks as a art package, but it provides a sufficient amount that is needed to still enjoy the film, at least as what I received out of it. And I will say, if you're a big Godzilla over Kong film fan, then you're just not necessarily getting as much out of Godzilla from this film. Obviously, he's going into the final battle. He is involved with integral parts of the story where he is necessary based on the biggest threat that's involved with how this story leads up to, but he still isn't a huge part of what the meat of this story is. It's focusing a lot more on Kong and his culture and background, as well as the Mute Girl's culture and background, building up those characters, integrating those as well as the human into the story a lot more. That flows rather well, but Godzilla isn't always a part of that. He only gets about 15 to 30-second clips here and there spread throughout until we really get to where he is really integrated into the story as a means to the fights as a whole. And that's not to say his smaller bits here and there are unnecessary to the film. They definitely fit in what the story is asking. You can't necessarily understand the story as deeply without knowing why Godzilla ends up being how he is at the end without those parts. But as a whole, there's just something that displaces his character from what the title suggests, being a Godzilla and Kong, the new Empire film. It is more so a Kong-focused film, and so just wanting to be aware with that of what you're expecting going into this film as a whole. And some parts of this film, obviously, it's just a big schlocky blockbuster. It's a bunch of fun, but you're not expecting a masterpiece or something that you could really dive deep into the characters, their pure motivations, and you're not getting a sense of the true threat they are causing to the humans. You're getting human-based characters that you kind of have a base layer getting into what you have that's enough for caring for the main characters and everything that's involved. But when it comes to the real world stakes, there's a lot of damage that obviously makes for the fun of the monster fights if that's what your goal going into it. But there still could be something that you are asking for more out of these films, that you're getting the real sense of the scale based on the death count or the damage that is done to the city, and you're really dismissing that within this film. Unfortunately, I wouldn't necessarily call it a negative, because some sense of this film is dismissing all of the stakes that's really held at hand, and they're really trying to focus in on the creatures and sometimes the humans that involved. That can be a little bit too much at times, but overall, it still is on its own pure focus that makes this good for what it's heading for, but not great as a film that would be deeply integrated into a real life story. And so that's just my personal thoughts on Godzilla x Kong, the new Empire, and I'd love to know what you think of it down in the comments below, or if this review is going to help you decide if you're going to see it or not. Are you big into this big blockbuster type of franchise, or are you just totally out of the realm of what this franchise is offering to you? So that's just all. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.